My name is Sister Chiara Lombardi, and I need to tell you about the day I lost everything I thought defined me, and how a teenage boy I once dismissed as unworthy of sainthood became the only person who believed in my innocence when the entire world turned against me. I was 22 years old when I first walked through the ancient wooden doors of the Clarice Monastery in Assisi. I remember that day so clearly, even now, 15 years later. The weight of my small suitcase, the smell of incense and old stone, the way the afternoon light filtered through the stained glass windows, creating patterns of blue and gold on the floor. I wasn't running toward God that day, if I'm being honest. I was running away from a world that felt hollow and meaningless. Milan had become suffocating to me. The noise, the ambition, the endless pursuit of things that didn't matter. My parents were devastated when I told them I wanted to become a nun. My mother cried for days. My father stopped speaking to me for a month. But I was determined. I needed silence. I needed purpose. I needed to belong to something greater than myself. The monastery gave me all of that, at least on the surface. For 12 years, those walls became my entire universe. I loved the rhythm of monastic life, the predictability of it. We rose at 4:30 every morning for lauds, our voices joining together in the pre-dawn darkness, singing psalms that had been sung in that same chapel for centuries. Then came personal prayer time, breakfast in silence, work assignments, mass, more prayer, simple meals, vespers, compline, and bed by 9. Every single day followed this pattern, and I found it deeply comforting. There was no chaos, no uncertainty, no need to make countless decisions about trivial things. The rule of St. Clare guided everything. I was good at monastic life. No, I was exceptional at it. I never missed a prayer time. I memorized all the chants and could sing them perfectly. I kept my cell immaculately clean. I followed every rule without question. The novices looked up to me. The older sisters praised my dedication. Mother Superior often mentioned me as an example during chapter meetings. And I won't lie to you, I loved it. I loved being seen as the perfect nun, the model religious sister. I told myself it was all for God's glory, but deep down there was something else feeding my devotion: pride. Vanity dressed up in a habit and veil. I was addicted to being admired for my holiness. In 2012, we had a visiting priest come to give us a talk during our weekly conference in the refectory. He was young, enthusiastic, and he spoke about what he called modern saints for a modern world. He showed us photographs on a small projector, and one of them was of a teenage boy with dark hair and a wide smile, sitting at a computer. The priest told us this boy's name was Carlo Acutis, that he had died of leukemia at 15, that he had created a website cataloging Eucharistic miracles, that he loved video games and soccer and normal teenage things, but that his devotion to the Eucharist had been extraordinary. I remember sitting there in my stiff wooden chair, arms folded inside my scapular, thinking this was ridiculous. A boy who spent time on computers? That's what we're calling sanctity now? Where was the austerity, the radical sacrifice, the total withdrawal from the world? I preferred St. Clare herself, who had literally run away from home, cut off her hair, and embraced absolute poverty. That was real holiness. This Carlo Acutis seemed like just another kid who happened to go to church. I dismissed him completely. I had no idea that in 3 years, this teenage boy would become the only witness who could save my life. Everything changed in March of 2015. I was 34 years old and had been in the monastery for 12 years. I had recently been told, privately, by Mother Superior, that she was considering appointing me as the new mistress of novices. It was a position of honor and responsibility, one that would put me in charge of training the young women who were entering religious life. I was thrilled, but tried to appear humble about it. Sister Benedetta had been the assistant to the previous mistress of novices, and everyone assumed she would get the promotion. She was 62, had been in the community for 40 years, and worked as our sacristan, taking care of all the sacred vessels and linens for Mass. We weren't close. She was formal with everyone, a bit cold, efficient in her duties but not particularly warm. On March 15th, a Tuesday morning, Mother Superior's voice came over the intercom system, asking all sisters to gather immediately in the chapter room. Her tone was severe, frightened even. We filed in silently, confused. Mother Superior stood at the front, her face pale. She told us that something terrible had happened. The relic kept in our chapel, a fragment of the actual veil of St. Clare, preserved for centuries in a small crystal reliquary, had been stolen from the tabernacle. The sacred object had been in our care since the 13th century. It was priceless, irreplaceable, not because of monetary value, but because of what it represented to our community. An investigation began immediately. The bishop was notified. Each of us was questioned individually. Who had access to the tabernacle? Who had been in the chapel outside of regular prayer times? I answered every question truthfully. Yes, I had the spare key to the tabernacle, because I sometimes helped Sister Benedetta prepare for Mass when she was ill. No, I had not been in the chapel at unusual hours. No, I had no idea who could have done this. I felt sick with worry, but I also felt above suspicion. Me? I was Sister Chiara, the exemplary nun. The idea that anyone would suspect me seemed absurd. But then the community meeting happened. We were all assembled again, and Mother Superior asked if anyone had observed anything unusual in the past week. Sister Benedetta stood up slowly, her aged hands trembling slightly. She looked directly at me and said in a quavering voice that 3 nights before the relic disappeared, she had gotten up to use the bathroom around 2 a.m, and as she passed the corridor leading to the chapel, she had seen me coming out of it. She said I had looked startled to see her, nervous, and that I had been clutching something under my scapular. She said she had thought it odd at the time, but had assumed I was simply praying and hadn't wanted to question me. I felt the floor drop out from under me. Every sister in that room turned to stare at me. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out at first. Finally, I managed to say that this was not true, that I had been in bed at 2 a.m. like every other night, that I went to sleep religiously at 9 and never woke until the bell for lauds. But my protestation sounded weak even to my own ears, defensive and desperate. Sister Benedetta shook her head sadly, saying she was only reporting what she had seen, that she had prayed about whether to come forward, and that her conscience demanded it. Then other evidence emerged. Someone checked my cell and found that the small drawer in my wardrobe, where I kept my personal prayer items, was unlocked. I always locked it, always. But now it hung open. When they examined my scapular more closely, they found small spots of candle wax on the fabric. I had not noticed them before, had no explanation for them. One of the candles in the chapel sacristy have been burned down recently, lower than it should have been. The key to the tabernacle that I kept in my locked drawer was found on my small desk instead, out in the open, as if I had used it recently and forgotten to put it away properly. Hey, quick pause here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment telling me your location. It's always amazing to see this community from all over the world. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Your support means everything and helps me continue telling stories that matter. The circumstantial evidence was damning. A canonical investigation was opened. The bishop himself came to interview me. I told him the truth over and over. I had not taken the relic. I had not been in the chapel at 2 a.m. Someone was lying or mistaken. But I had no proof, no alibi, no way to demonstrate my innocence. I slept alone in my cell like every other sister. No one could vouch for my whereabouts in the middle of the night. And Sister Benedetta had been in the community for decades. She was respected, known for her piety. Why would she lie? What possible reason would she have to falsely accuse me? The investigation lasted 2 weeks. They were the longest, most agonizing weeks of my life. I continued going through the motions of community life, but every moment was torture. The other sisters avoided my eyes. Some looked at me with pity, others with disgust. A few still seemed to believe in me, but even they were uncertain. The doubt was everywhere, poisoning the air. I couldn't eat. I barely slept. I prayed desperately, begging God to reveal the truth, to vindicate me, to show everyone that I was innocent. But heaven remained silent. Finally, the bishop announced his decision. While he could not prove definitively that I had stolen the relic, the weight of evidence against me was substantial. More importantly, I had violated the trust that was fundamental to religious life. Even if I had not stolen the relic, my carelessness with the key and my presence in the chapel at inappropriate hours, as testified by a credible witness, showed a concerning lack of proper conduct. He recommended my dismissal from the community. Mother Superior agreed. I was given 3 days to pack my belongings and leave. I remember standing in her office as she pronounced the sentence. Mother Superior would not look at me directly. She spoke in clipped, formal tones, as if reading from a script. She said I had broken sacred trust. She said that even if I believed myself innocent, my behavior had been inappropriate. She said the community could no longer maintain confidence in my vocation. I tried to speak, to defend myself one more time, but she held up her hand. The decision was final. I needed to accept it with obedience and humility. Those were her last words to me as a member of the community. Obedience and humility. I packed my few possessions in a daze. 12 years of life reduced to a single suitcase. My few books, some letters from my parents, a rosary, some underclothes, 2 sets of civilian clothes that had been kept in storage since I entered. As I walked through the monastery for the last time, some sisters came to say goodbye. A few hugged me, crying. Others stayed in their cells, unable or unwilling to face me. Sister Benedetta was nowhere to be seen. I later learned she had requested to remain in the chapel in prayer during my departure. At the time, I thought it was because she felt guilty for having to testify against me. Now I know differently. I left the monastery under a gray March sky. My father came to pick me up, driving the 3 hours from Milan in silence. My mother cried when she saw me, holding me tight while I stood there numb and unresponsive. They set up my old bedroom for me. The walls still had marks where my teenage posters had been. The desk where I had studied for university entrance exams. The window overlooking our small garden. I was 34 years old, and I was back in my childhood room, not as a visitor, but as a permanent resident. A failure, a disgrace. I stopped praying. I couldn't. How could I speak to a God who had allowed this to happen? I had given him everything, my youth, my future, my entire life. I had followed every rule, kept every observance. I had been so careful, so dedicated. And for what? To be destroyed by a lie, expelled in shame, stripped of the only identity I had known for over a decade. What kind of God permits such injustice? What kind of father allows his daughter to be falsely accused and humiliated when she had done nothing wrong? For 3 months, I barely left my room. Depression settled over me like a thick fog. I couldn't see any future for myself. I wasn't Sister Chiara anymore. I wasn't anything, just a failed nun living with her aging parents, unable to work, unable to function, unable to pray. My mother would bring meals to my door. Most of them I left untouched. I lost weight. I stopped caring about my appearance. Some days I didn't even get out of bed. My parents tried everything. They suggested I see a therapist. They encouraged me to go out, to take walks, to reconnect with old friends. I refused all of it. What was the point? Even if I could rebuild some kind of normal life, even if I could find work and move out and pretend to be okay, I would always know the truth. I would always carry the knowledge that I had been falsely accused of one of the worst violations possible in religious life, and that no one had believed me. That God himself had remained silent while I was condemned. It was late June when it happened. I had spent the entire day in bed, not from physical illness, but from the sheer weight of despair that made movement feel impossible. Night came. I hadn't eaten anything. My mother had stopped knocking on my door hours ago. I lay there in the darkness, feeling a physical pain in my chest that was so intense, I wondered if I was having a heart attack. Maybe that would be better. Maybe just not existing anymore would be preferable to this endless anguish. I cried until I had no tears left, and then, exhausted beyond measure, I fell into a deep sleep. The dream began gently. I found myself standing in the chapel of the monastery, but it was empty and filled with an unusual golden light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The quality of light was unlike anything I had ever seen, warm and alive, almost pulsing with gentle energy. I looked around, confused but not frightened. Everything was familiar yet transformed, more vivid and real than reality itself. Then I noticed someone kneeling in front of the tabernacle, a young person, maybe 15 or 16 years old, wearing a casual hoodie and jeans. He was praying with his hands folded, completely absorbed. I knew, without being told, without any logical reason, that this was Carlo Acutis. The teenage boy I had dismissed with such contempt 3 years earlier. He turned and looked at me, and his smile was radiant, full of joy and understanding. He said my name, Sister Chiara. His voice was clear and kind, with none of the judgment I had been carrying from everyone else. I felt myself starting to cry again. He stood up and walked toward me, and I noticed he was wearing Nike sneakers, which struck me as oddly funny and human in this supernatural moment. He told me he had seen who lied about me. He said he knew I was innocent, that he had witnessed everything, that the truth had not been hidden from him, even if it had been hidden from everyone else. I felt a surge of anger then, which surprised me. I asked him why he had not defended me before. Why had he waited until I was destroyed, expelled, broken? Why had God allowed this injustice if Carlo could see the truth? He looked at me with such compassion that my anger began to dissolve even before he spoke. He explained that I had needed to lose my reputation before I could find my true faith. He said I had loved being admired more than I had loved the truth. He said that my identity had been built on being seen as perfect, as the exemplary nun, and that this idol had to be shattered before I could become who God actually wanted me to be. His words cut through me, but they rang true in a way that was both painful and liberating. I had been so focused on maintaining my image of perfection that my spiritual life had become performative. I prayed to be seen praying. I obeyed to be praised for obedience. I fasted so others would notice my dedication. Carlo was right. I had loved my reputation more than I had loved God. Then he took my hand, and his touch was solid and real, not ghostly or ethereal. He led me through the chapel to the sacristy, that small room where the sacred vessels and vestments are kept. He pointed to an old wooden cabinet in the corner, one that I had seen countless times but never paid much attention to. He told me to look at the back panel of the cabinet, specifically the third wooden plank from the bottom. He said there was a hollow space there, and inside that space I would find the stolen relic. Sister Benedetta had hidden it there. My mind reeled. Sister Benedetta? But why? Carlo explained that she had been consumed with envy when she learned that Mother Superior intended to appoint me as mistress of novices instead of her. She had spent 40 years expecting that position, believing it was her due. When she realized she was being passed over for someone so much younger, someone who had only been in community for 12 years, her resentment had twisted into hatred. She had planned everything carefully. She had stolen the relic herself, hidden it where no one would think to look, planted the evidence against me, and given false testimony about seeing me in the chapel. She had destroyed my life because she wanted the position I was going to receive. Carlo continued speaking. He told me that Sister Benedetta had made one mistake, one detail she had forgotten in her careful planning. The cloth she had used to wrap the relic before hiding it was an old handkerchief, and that handkerchief had her name embroidered on it in blue thread. Her mother had made it for her before she entered the convent decades ago. It was still there, wrapped around the reliquary in its hiding place. I asked him what I should do with this information. He told me to seek the truth, to find the evidence, to clear my name. But then he added something that I have thought about every single day since. He told me to forgive Sister Benedetta. He said that carrying hatred would poison me more than the false accusation ever could. He said that forgiveness was not about excusing what she did, but about freeing myself from the prison of bitterness. He looked at me with those young, wise eyes and said that he would help me, but that I had to choose whether I wanted vindication so I could reclaim my reputation, or whether I wanted truth so I could become truly free. Then the dream ended. I woke up abruptly, sitting straight up in bed, my heart pounding, sweat covering my skin. I looked at the clock. It was 4:37 in the morning. My first thought was that it had been just a dream, a desperate fantasy created by my traumatized mind. But the details were so specific so clear. The cabinet in the sacristy, the third plank from the bottom, the hollow space, the embroidered handkerchief with Sister Benedetta's name. I sat there in the pre-dawn darkness, shaking. What if it was true? What if Carlo Acutis had actually appeared to me and shown me where the evidence was hidden? It seemed insane, but what if? I thought about trying to go back to sleep, to forget about it, to dismiss it as my brain trying to protect me from reality. But I couldn't. The dream had been too vivid, too detailed, too real. There was only one person in the monastery who might still help me. Sister Teresa, the elderly portress who answered the door and managed visitors. She was 83 years old, had been in the community for 60 years, and had always been kind to me. She had hugged me on my last day and whispered that she believed in my innocence. I had kept her phone number, though I had not called it. Until now. I waited until 6 a.m. when I knew she would be up, and then, with trembling hands, I dialed the monastery. Sister Teresa answered, her voice creaky with age. I identified myself and heard her sharp intake of breath. I told her I needed her help with something that would sound completely crazy. I explained about the dream, about Carlo Acutis, about the cabinet in the sacristy, the third plank, the hollow space, the handkerchief. I heard the skepticism in her silence. Finally, she said that what I was asking was not just strange, but potentially disruptive to the community. I begged her to trust me, to just check, to see if there was any truth to it. I told her that if she found nothing, I would never contact the monastery again, that I would accept my fate and move on. There was a long pause. Then she sighed and said she would look, but only because she had lived long enough to know that God works in mysterious ways, and that dismissing the impossible sometimes meant missing the miraculous. She said she would call me back in an hour. That hour was the longest of my entire life. I could not sit still. I paced my room. I went downstairs and made coffee that I couldn't drink. My mother asked if I was okay, and I told her I was waiting for an important phone call. I watched the clock as the minutes dragged by with excruciating slowness. What if Sister Teresa found nothing? What if the dream had been just a dream? What if I had allowed myself to hope only to be crushed again? When the phone finally rang, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Sister Teresa's voice was barely above a whisper, choked with tears. She said it was all there, everything exactly as I had described. The cabinet, the false back panel on the third plank, the hollow space, the reliquary wrapped in an old handkerchief. And on the handkerchief, embroidered in faded blue thread, was the name Benedetta Moretti. Sister Benedetta's full name, from before she had entered religious life. I collapsed onto the floor, the phone pressed to my ear, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. Sister Teresa was crying too. She said she had brought Mother Superior to see it, that Mother Superior had gone white as a sheet, that they had immediately called the bishop. She said Sister Benedetta had been summoned and confronted with the evidence. After an hour of denials, she had finally broken down and confessed everything. The envy, the planning, the lies, the false testimony, all of it. She had been in the sacristy when Sister Teresa and Mother Superior found the reliquary, and seeing the handkerchief had shattered her. She knew she had been caught by something she had completely forgotten about, a detail from decades ago that she never thought would matter. The next days were a blur of phone calls and meetings. The bishop reopened my case immediately. He called me personally to apologize. his voice heavy with regret and embarrassment. He said that a grave injustice had been done, that I had been wrongly accused and wrongly punished, that the church had failed me. He offered to issue a formal statement declaring my innocence and explaining what had really happened. Mother Superior also called, her voice breaking as she apologized. She said she had doubted me when she should have trusted me, that she had acted too hastily, that she hoped I could forgive her. She asked if I wanted to return to the community. I told her I needed time to think. Part of me wanted to rush back immediately, to reclaim my place, to be vindicated publicly in front of everyone who had doubted me. But I kept hearing Carlo's words from the dream. Did I want vindication to reclaim my reputation, or did I want truth to become free? I realized that if I went back immediately, fueled by the desire to prove everyone wrong, I would just be rebuilding the same idol of reputation that had been the problem in the first place. I spent the next 6 months in Milan, slowly healing. I started praying again, but differently. Not performing for an audience, not trying to be the perfect example, just honestly talking to God about my pain, my anger, my confusion, my gratitude. I went to daily Mass at a small parish church where no one knew me. I volunteered at a soup kitchen. I took long walks. I read. I thought. I let myself be nobody special, just another person trying to figure out life. During that time, I also arranged to meet Sister Benedetta. She had been removed from the monastery and sent to a retreat house for a period of spiritual counseling and psychological evaluation. I traveled there one autumn afternoon, nervous about seeing the woman who had destroyed my life. When they brought her to the visiting room, I was shocked by her appearance. She looked 20 years older, shrunken and broken. She began crying the moment she saw me, apologizing over and over. She told me she had been consumed by envy for years, that she had watched me receive praise and recognition while she was taken for granted, that when she learned about the mistress of novices position, she felt something snap inside her. She said she had convinced herself I didn't deserve any of it, that I was too young, too proud, that I needed to be taken down. She said the guilt had been eating her alive since the moment she gave false testimony, but that pride had kept her from confessing until the evidence was found. I listened to all of this, and I felt an unexpected wave of compassion. Yes, she had hurt me terribly. Yes, she had lied and destroyed my life. But looking at her broken form, I saw someone who had been imprisoned by her own bitterness for years, who had let envy rot her soul from the inside. In a strange way, we had both been trapped. She had been trapped by jealousy, and I had been trapped by pride. Her sin had exposed mine. Carlo had been right. I needed to forgive her, not because she deserved it, but because holding on to hatred would keep me in prison. I knelt down beside her chair and took her aged hands in mine. I told her that I forgave her. I said it out loud, and as I did, I felt something release inside my chest, a tightness I hadn't realized I was carrying. She sobbed, gripping my hands, asking how I could possibly forgive her. I told her about the dream, about Carlo Acutis showing me the truth, about how he had told me that this experience was meant to free both of us. I told her that her betrayal had been the most painful thing I had ever experienced, but that it had also been the thing that shattered my pride and forced me to find real faith instead of performance. I told her that I was grateful, in a way I could not fully explain, for what had happened. I told her we were both being given a chance to start over. Before I continue, I'm really curious. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you're finding value in this story, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep sharing these experiences with all of you. I returned to the monastery in December, 6 months after the truth came out. But I returned differently. I asked Mother Superior if I could come back not as the sister who had been vindicated, not as the one who deserved special recognition for what I had suffered, but simply as the newest member of the community, starting over. I asked to be given the most basic tasks, the work that no one wanted. I asked to be invisible. She was surprised by my request, but agreed. So I came back to the place that had been my home for 12 years, and I began again. I was assigned to clean the bathrooms, to help in the kitchen, to do the laundry. I was not given any position of honor or responsibility. The mistress of novices' role went to someone else. I attended prayers with the community but did not stand out. I sang the Psalms without trying to be heard above others. I followed the rule without needing anyone to notice. And something miraculous happened. I began to experience joy for the first time in my religious life. Real joy, not the satisfaction of being praised, but the deep contentment of knowing I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I needed to do. Scrubbing toilets became a form of prayer. Folding laundry became meditation. Washing dishes became an act of love. I was free from the exhausting burden of maintaining a reputation. No one expected anything from me. I could just be. I began studying Carlo Acutis' life in earnest. I learned about his deep devotion to the Eucharist, his kindness to the poor, his sense of humor, his love of normal things like video games and animals. I read his writings and was struck by his simple, profound faith. This was not a saint who performed grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices. He was a saint who lived ordinary life extraordinarily well, who found God in the everyday, who combined being a normal teenager with being radically devoted to Christ. I had been so wrong about him. I had judged him as not austere enough, not serious enough, not radical enough. But his holiness was more threatening to ego than any hair shirt or dramatic penance, because it was rooted in genuine love, rather than the desire to be seen as holy. In October 2020, Carlo Acutis was beatified in Assisi. I was there in the crowd of thousands who gathered in the square. I stood anonymous among all those people, watching the ceremony, crying with gratitude. This teenage boy, who I had dismissed with contempt, had saved my life in every way that mattered. He had proven my innocence when no one else could. But more than that, he had told me the truth about myself. He had shown me that my greatest injury had been my greatest gift. He had taught me that vindication without transformation is worthless. Today, 10 years after my false accusation and expulsion, I am still here at the Clarice Monastery. I am still doing humble work that no one notices. I still clean and cook and serve. I am not the mistress of novices. I am not in any position of authority. Most visitors to the monastery would not know my name or my story, and I have never been happier in my entire life. Sometimes I am asked about the dream, about whether I really believe Carlo Acutis appeared to me, or whether it was my subconscious mind somehow accessing information I already knew. My answer is that it doesn't matter. Whether it was a supernatural vision or a gift of extraordinary intuition, the source was ultimately the same. God wanted to reveal the truth, and he used Carlo Acutis to do it. The boy who loved computers had hacked into my soul and exposed the malware of pride that was corrupting my spiritual operating system. I also think about Sister Benedetta often. She completed her time at the retreat house and was eventually transferred to a different monastery in northern Italy, where she could have a fresh start away from the scene of her betrayal. We write to each other occasionally. She is 81 now, frail and quiet. In her last letter, she told me that the worst thing about what she did was not the punishment or the shame, but the realization that she had wasted 40 years of religious life, consumed by comparison and resentment. She said she wished she could go back and tell her younger self that someone else's success was not her failure, that there was enough of God's love for everyone. I wrote back and told her that I understood, that I had wasted 12 years chasing admiration instead of holiness, and that we had both been given the painful grace of having our idols destroyed, so we could finally worship the right thing. If you are listening to this story right now, and you have been falsely accused of something, if you are living under the weight of lies that have destroyed your reputation, if you feel like God has abandoned you and the truth will never come out, I want you to hear this. Carlo Acutis sees. He saw who lied about me when no one else was looking. He knows your truth too. He will reveal it in his time and in his way. But I also want to warn you about something, because this is the hard part that no one tells you. The vindication might not come in the form you expect. It might not restore your reputation or put you back in the position you lost. It might come quietly, privately, in a way that serves your soul's transformation rather than your ego's satisfaction. When I was in Milan, broken and depressed and furious at God, I wanted my old life back. I wanted to be Sister Chiara, the exemplary nun again, the one everyone admired. I wanted to walk back into that monastery with my head held high, with everyone knowing they had been wrong about me. I wanted public vindication, an apology from everyone who had doubted me, restoration of my status. But that is not what I got. What I got instead was the truth, yes, but also the revelation of my own spiritual poverty. I got my innocence proven, but I also got my pride exposed and destroyed. I got to return to the monastery, but as nobody special. And that gift, the gift of being freed from the need to be admired, has been worth more than any honor or position could ever be. Carlo Acutis died at 15 years old, suffering from an aggressive form of leukemia. In his last days, he offered his pain for the Pope and for the Church. He did not waste his suffering. He transformed it into love. That is what he taught me through this whole experience. Suffering is not meaningless if you let it transform you. Injustice is not the end if you let it reveal what needs to be healed in you. False accusation is not just cruelty if you let it shatter your false self so your true self can emerge. I am 47 years old now. I have been in religious life for 25 years, 12 before the accusation and 13 after. The second half has been completely different from the first. I am no longer trying to be the perfect nun. I am just trying to be present, honest, humble, and kind. I fail at this regularly. I still catch myself caring too much what others think, still feel the old pull of wanting to be noticed and praised. But now I recognize it for what it is, and I bring it to prayer instead of feeding it. People sometimes visit the monastery asking to speak with me, having heard my story. I usually decline, preferring to remain in the background. But occasionally, when someone has traveled far or seems genuinely in need, I will meet with them briefly. They often want to hear about the dream, about the supernatural revelation, about Carlo Acutis appearing and showing me the truth. And yes, I tell them about that. But what I really want them to understand is that the miracle was not just the discovery of the hidden relic. The miracle was what happened inside me through the experience of being falsely accused. The miracle was the death of my pride and the birth of my freedom. The miracle was learning that truth is more important than reputation, and that humility is more valuable than honor. Last week, a young woman came to visit. She was 23, had just graduated from university, and was considering religious life. She asked me what advice I would give to someone entering the monastery. I thought for a long time before answering. Finally, I told her this: come for the right reasons. Do not come to be admired or to be known as holy. Do not come to escape life or to prove something to yourself or others. Come because you genuinely want to give your life to God, with all the ordinariness and hiddenness that entails. Come prepared to scrub toilets and wash dishes and be nobody special. Come ready to have your ego dismantled piece by piece. Come knowing that the greatest graces often come disguised as the greatest humiliations. Come willing to be misunderstood, misjudged, and even falsely accused, and to respond with forgiveness rather than bitterness. Come to love, not to be loved. Come to serve, not to be served. Come to give everything and expect nothing in return. She looked at me with wide eyes and asked if that sounded discouraging. I smiled and told her no. It sounded like freedom. Real freedom. The kind that comes when you stop trying to control your image and your reputation, and you just surrender everything to God's will. The kind of freedom that lets you sleep peacefully at night, even when people speak lies about you, because you know that your value does not depend on their opinion. The kind of freedom that turns washing dishes into joy, because you are not doing it to be seen, but simply because it needs to be done. She thanked me and left. I do not know if she will enter religious life or not. It does not matter. What matters is that she heard the truth. This life is not about becoming someone impressive. It is about becoming no one, so that Christ can be everything. As I finish telling you this story, I want to leave you with one final thought. Carlo Acutis once said that we are all born as originals, but we die as photocopies, because we spend our lives trying to be like everyone else, instead of becoming who God created us to be. For years, I was a photocopy of what I thought a perfect nun should be. The false accusation destroyed that photocopy, tore it to shreds, burned it to ashes. And from those ashes, something original began to emerge. The real Chiara, the one God had intended all along, the one who was not performing holiness, but living it quietly, imperfectly, authentically. If you have made it to the end of this long story, thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share this strange and painful and beautiful journey with you. I hope it encourages you if you are facing injustice. I hope it challenges you if you are chasing reputation. I hope it comforts you if you have been betrayed. Most of all, I hope it reminds you that the teenage boy who loved video games and computers is now in heaven, and He sees everything, and He is working on your behalf, and His advocacy is more powerful than any earthly court. Trust Him. Trust the process, even when it is agonizing. Trust that what seems like the end might actually be the beginning of something far better than you could have imagined. The truth will set you free. But first, it might destroy your false self. And that destruction is the greatest gift you could ever receive. May Carlo Acutis intercede for all of us who struggle with pride, with the need to be admired, with the fear of being nobody. May he teach us what he learned so young, that holiness is not about being impressive, but about being genuinely in love with Jesus, and that this love shows itself not in grand gestures, but in ordinary faithfulness, in kindness to others, in humble service, in choosing truth over reputation every single time. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find your truth. May you find your freedom. May you find the courage to let go of who you think you should be and become who you actually are. God bless you wherever you are in the world right now. And remember, Carlo Acutis is praying for you. He sees your struggle. He knows your truth. Trust him.